The cargo hold smelled of rust and oil, the air stale with recycled oxygen. Yari pressed herself against the cold metal wall, holding her breath as the heavy boots of the human crew clanged on the grated floors above. The ship, Idolan, was a rust bucket transport vessel bound for Tarley's 3, a neutral colony beyond the reach of the warring factions. It was her only chance. She clutched the thin, tattered shawl around her narrow shoulders. It barely hid her shimmering lavender skin, a dead giveaway of her species. Yari was Solari, one of the millions displaced by the endless war between the Dominion and the free colonies. Her people were scattered, their homeworld reduced to little more than a battlefield graveyard. The last thing she had was a mother's whispered command: run, survive. She had done just that, hidden in the underbelly of a Dominion freighter, slipped through the docks of a neutral station, crawled into the storage bay of Idolan before the engines roared to life. Now, she was here, alone. A dull thud sounded overhead, and Yari's heart stopped. Damn rats, a gruff voice muttered. Another sound, closer. Then, a clang. The hatch above unlatched, and a square of light pierced the darkness. A man's silhouette loomed against it. Son of a... Yari bolted. She scrambled backward, hands and feet skidding across the deck. The man, human, tall, broad, dropped down with the grace of someone used to moving in tight spaces. His face came into view, shadowed by stubble and exhaustion. His eyes, sharp and dark, locked onto her. Yari's throat tightened. His brow furrowed. What the hell? He moved closer, boots heavy against the deck. Yari braced for a strike, for the hard grip of an arm dragging her out. But it never came. Instead, he exhaled, rubbing his face. Figures. A damn stowaway. Silence. Then, are you gonna bite me or something? Yari blinked. What? He gestured vaguely at her, his face unreadable. Look, kid, if you've got acid spit, venom claws, or some psychic mind blast thing, just let me know now. Saves me the trouble later. Despite herself, Yari's lips twitched. I don't. Great. That's one less problem. He sighed and crossed his arms. Now, who the hell are you? Yari swallowed hard. She had expected shouting, alarms, maybe even being tossed out of the airlock. Not this bizarre calm. Yari. He raised an eyebrow. That it? She nodded. The man studied her for a long moment, then exhaled. Owen. Yari's hands clenched around her shawl. You are not turning me in? Owen scratched the back of his head. Kid, do you see this ship? He waved vaguely at the rust-streaked walls. No offense, but we're barely legal ourselves. We don't ask questions we don't want to know the answers to. Yari hesitated. So, I can stay? Owen's eyes narrowed. Then, with a heavy sigh, he muttered, guess we'll figure it out. And just like that, Yari had found her first ally. Owen had one rule. If you're gonna stay, you gotta pull your weight. Yari worked hard. The Idolan wasn't a ship that tolerated deadweight. Owen was a mechanic, keeping the ancient engines from tearing themselves apart. The rest of the crew, smugglers, ex-soldiers, and drifters, handled cargo, navigation, and the occasional off-the-record deal. Yari learned quickly. She was small, quick, and clever with her hands. She fixed broken wiring, crawled through narrow maintenance ducts, and memorized the Idolan schematics. Owen, despite his gruff nature, was patient. He taught her, corrected her mistakes, never once raised a hand in anger, and he never asked why she was here. He didn't need to. Some nights, Yari would wake to the muffled sound of Owen's nightmares. He never spoke of them, but she knew the look of someone who had lost everything. She knew because she saw it in the mirror. Time passed. The Idolan made port on Tarley's 3, a neutral colony, untouched by the war, but not immune to its consequences. It was a place for survivors, for those who had nowhere else to go. For Yari, it was a new beginning. But the past had other plans. Tarley's 3 was a melting pot of species. Humans, Solari, Bracthants, and dozens more lived in uneasy peace, bound together by survival. It was also a place where secrets didn't stay buried. Yari had thought she was safe. She was wrong. They found her in the marketplace. 3 figures. hooded, watching. At first, she ignored them. Just another set of wary eyes in a city of strangers. But they followed. Through winding streets, past vendors selling black market tech, down alleys where the light barely reached. And when she turned a final corner, a hand clamped over her mouth. Panic surged. She thrashed, kicking, twisting. Shoo! A voice. Calm, cold. Do not struggle, child. The grip tightened. Yari's heart pounded. Then, she saw their faces. Silari. Her own people. Her breath caught. No. The tallest one, his eyes gleaming with eerie silver light, tilted his head. You should not be here, little one. Yari's pulse thundered. I don't. You belong to us, he murmured. And we are taking you home. A second figure pulled a device from their cloak. A thin, needle-like injector. Yari's scream never left her throat. Then, a gunshot. The grip on her vanished. The figure behind her staggered back, clutching their shoulder. Yari gasped, spinning. Owen stood at the alley's entrance, pistol raised. His eyes were dark, cold, deadly. You want her, he growled. His finger tightened on the trigger. Come and take her. The Solari hesitated. Then, without a word, they melted into the shadows. Owen lowered his gun, turning to Yari. His face was unreadable. You all right, kid? Yari's breath came in ragged gulps. And then, in a voice barely above a whisper, they found me. Owen's jaw tightened. Not for long. Because if they wanted Yari, they'd have to go through him. And Owen wasn't about to lose family. Not again. Owen led Yari through the winding backstreets of Tarley's 3, his grip firm on her wrist but not harsh. He moved like a man who had been hunted before, his sharp eyes scanning every shadow, every rooftop. They didn't speak until they reached the Idolan, docked in the lower bay of the colony. The ship wasn't much, patchwork repairs, rusted plating. But to Yari, it was home. Owen ushered her inside, sealing the airlock behind them. Only then did he exhale, rubbing a hand down his face. All right, he muttered, turning to her. Talk. Yari hesitated. Owen had never asked questions before, never pushed her for the truth. Now, he needed it. She swallowed. They were Solari. No shit, Owen muttered. The glowing eyes kinda gave it away. Yari's hands clenched. They want me back. Owen narrowed his eyes. Why? A pause. Yari knew she had to tell him. He had saved her life. He deserved the truth. I am not just any Solari, she admitted. I was part of something important. Owen crossed his arms, waiting. My mother was one of the seers. Owen frowned. Seers? Yari nodded. They were advisors. Mystics. They could see fragments of possible futures. Owen let out a breath. And you? Yari hesitated. Then, reluctantly, she answered. I was trained to be one. Silence stretched between them. Owen ran a hand through his hair. So what? They want you back, 'cause you might be able to see the future? They do not want me back, Yari whispered. They want to use me. Owen exhaled sharply. Of course they do. She looked up at him. Owen, what do we do? Owen didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked to a nearby crate, grabbed a rag, and started cleaning his pistol with slow, deliberate motions. His expression darkened, his jaw tightening. We make sure they don't get you, he finally said. Simple. Certain. But Yari saw the weight behind those words. Owen had lost his family before. He wasn't going to lose another. The attack came 2 nights later. Yari had just finished recalibrating the ship's coolant system when the alarms blared. A klaxon howled through the Idolan, red lights flashing across the bulkheads. Owen's voice crackled over the intercom. Yari, hide. Now. Fear gripped her. She barely had time to react before the first explosion rocked the ship. The airlock door burst open. A shadowed figure stepped through, a pulse rifle gleaming in their hands. The Solari had come for her. Yari scrambled backward, heart hammering. Her mind raced, searching for an escape. But then Owen was there. He moved fast, faster than she had ever seen. He tackled the intruder with brutal efficiency, wrenching the rifle aside. The 2 men crashed into the bulkhead, struggling for control. Yari didn't hesitate. She grabbed the nearest tool, a heavy spanner, and swung. The intruder crumpled. Owen exhaled, looking down at the unconscious figure. Not bad, kid. The ship rocked again. More explosions. More intruders. Owen turned to her, eyes dark. Time to go. They ran. The ship was compromised, swarming with Solari operatives. Owen led Yari through the maze of maintenance tunnels, moving with the surety of a man who knew every bolt and rivet of his ship. But they weren't fast enough. By the time they reached the docking bay, 3 Solari waited. Weapons drawn. Yari skidded to a halt, breath ragged. The leader stepped forward, tall, cold-eyed, his voice smooth as steel. Give us the girl. Owen didn't hesitate. He shot first. The blast caught one in the shoulder. The second fired back. Owen twisted, the shot grazing his arm. Yari barely registered what she was doing before her instincts took over. Her training. Her bloodline. The fragments of future her mind could barely hold. She moved. In the split second before the third Solari pulled the trigger, she shifted. A heartbeat's warning. A single step to the side. The shot missed. And Owen didn't waste the opening. A final gunshot. A body hitting the floor. Silence. Yari stared at him, chest heaving. You killed them. Owen didn't look at the bodies. His gaze stayed on her. You all right? Yari's throat tightened. She had always known Owen was dangerous. She had never seen it so clearly until now. She nodded. Owen exhaled, gripping his wounded arm. Good. He glanced back at the idolan, flickering lights reflecting in his dark eyes. We can't stay. Yari swallowed. Where do we go? Owen reloaded his pistol, jaw set. Somewhere they can't follow. And with that, they disappeared into the void. The idolan was gone. As they fled into the lower docking rings of Tarley's 3, Yari glanced back once. Just once. To see flames licking at the hull of the only home she had known. The Solari had sabotaged the ship beyond saving. Owen didn't look back. He just kept moving, his injured arm tucked against his chest, his gun clenched in his good hand. Yari stumbled after him, her pulse a frantic drumbeat in her ears. Owen, keep moving, he gritted out. They dodged through the maze of back alleys, past dimly lit repair shops and the neon glow of seedy cantinas. The underbelly of Tarley's 3 was a place for outlaws, but even here, Yari could feel the weight of unseen eyes tracking them. They weren't safe. Not yet. Owen finally ducked into a dimly lit service tunnel, shoving Yari ahead of him before sealing the heavy bulkhead behind them. The air was thick with the scent of oil and burning wires. Only then did he let out a shuddering breath and slump against the wall. Yari swallowed hard, staring at his wound. Blood stained his sleeve. Too much. You're hurt, she whispered. I'll live. But his voice was tight. She hesitated, then reached for him. Let me help. Owen caught her wrist before she could touch him. His grip was firm but not unkind. He exhaled slowly, looking at her. Not as a scared kid, but as someone who had just saved his life back there. All right, he muttered. Make it quick. Yari worked fast, tearing a strip from her own tunic to bandage the wound. She had seen injuries like this before, on refugees, on her own people. This will hurt, she warned. Owen gave a humorless chuckle. Kid, everything already hurts. She tied the makeshift bandage tight. Owen hissed but didn't flinch. Yari sat back. Done. Owen flexed his fingers, testing the arm. Then, with a grunt, he forced himself to his feet. We need a way off-world, he muttered. Yari frowned. We don't have a ship. Yeah, no shit, Owen muttered. But I know someone who does. Yari hesitated. Can we trust them? Owen gave her a look. We don't have a choice. And that was that. The spaceport tavern smelled of stale booze and desperation. Owen led Yari through the crowded establishment, ignoring the way conversations quieted when they entered. He walked with the kind of presence that warned people not to ask questions. At the back of the room, a woman sat alone at a battered metal table, her boots propped up, a drink in her hand. Her dark hair was streaked with silver, and a long scar ran from her temple to her jaw. Owen pulled out a chair and sat down without asking. Yari stood beside him, tense. The woman's sharp green eyes flicked over Owen, then settled on Yari. Didn't think you were the adopting type, Owen, she drawled. Owen grunted. Didn't plan on it. The woman smirked. Yet here we are. She took a sip of her drink. So, what do you need? Ship, Owen said. Fast one. The woman arched an eyebrow. That's expensive. Owen leaned forward. Not asking for charity, Vex. The smuggler, Captain Vex Salora, studied him for a long moment. Then her gaze slid back to Yari. She's the reason you're in this mess, isn't she? Yari stiffened. Owen's expression didn't change. Does it matter? Vex exhaled through her nose, setting her drink down. I don't like Solari business, Owen. It's messy. Owen didn't blink. I can pay. Vex smirked. With what? Your charming personality? Yari felt a sinking feeling. They had nothing. No ship, no credits, nothing of value. But then Owen reached into his jacket and pulled out a small data chip. Vex's smirk vanished. Is that what I think it is? Owen nodded. Yari looked between them. What is it? Vex let out a slow breath. A Dominion encryption key, she murmured. The kind that can get you into military databases. Yari's eyes widened. Where did you get that? Owen didn't answer. Vex drummed her fingers against the table, considering. Then she exhaled. All right, Owen, you've got a deal. Yari let out a quiet breath of relief. Vex stood. My ship's in Dock 12. We leave in an hour. Owen nodded. Good. Vex gave Yari one last unreadable look before turning away. And just like that, they had a way off-world. They barely made it out of Tarley's, 3 alive. By the time Vex's ship, the Revenant, lifted off, Dominion patrol ships were already sweeping the colony. The Solari had called in reinforcements. We've got fighters on our tail, Vex called from the cockpit. Owen strapped into the co-pilot's seat, grimacing. Figures. Yari clung to the back of the seat, her stomach twisting as the ship swerved through the upper atmosphere. Can we outrun them? Vex shot her a sharp grin. Kid, I don't run. I fight. With that, she punched the thrusters. The ship screamed through the void, dodging enemy fire. Owen worked the weapon systems, returning fire with sharp, precise shots. Yari barely breathed, watching the battle unfold around her. The Dominion ships were relentless. Faster, more advanced. But Vex was better. With a final twist, she sent the Revenant into a slingshot maneuver, forcing the Dominion fighters into the path of a drifting asteroid. A fiery explosion rocked the dark. Silence. Then, the ship steadied. The danger was gone. Yari sagged against the chair, her limbs shaking. Owen let out a breath. Remind me to never play cards with you, Vex. Vex smirked. Smart man. Yari looked out the viewport. The stars stretched before them, endless and unknown. Where do we go now? She asked softly. Owen glanced at Vex. Vex leaned back, tilting her head in thought. Well, she said, if you really want to disappear, I know just the place. Yari swallowed hard. Something told her their journey was just beginning. The Revenant slipped into the vast, star-dappled silence of uncharted space. Vex worked the controls with a casual ease, her fingers dancing across the console as she navigated past the Dominion's long reach. Yari sat beside Owen in the cockpit, her eyes locked onto the swirling nebulae in the distance. Owen leaned forward, watching the star charts update. Where exactly are we headed? Vex smirked. Ever hear of Black Outpost? Owen's expression darkened. Tell me you're joking. Yari blinked. What is it? Vex shrugged. A station on the edge of nowhere. No laws. No faction rule. Only place you can disappear for real. Owen scowled. It's a pirate den, Vex. A useful pirate den, Vex corrected. And the only place I know where Dominion and Solari alike won't dare step foot. Yari felt a cold shiver run through her. Why? Vex's grin was sharp. Because the people who run it don't take kindly to anyone bringing war to their doorstep. Owen muttered something under his breath, but he didn't argue. Yari studied him. His jaw was set, his body tense. This was a man who had spent his whole life fighting to stay away from places like Black Outpost. Yet now, for her, he was heading straight toward one. She didn't know whether to be grateful or guilty. The descent into shadows. The station came into view hours later, rising from the void like a skeletal behemoth. Black Outpost wasn't a single structure. It was a graveyard of ships welded together into a chaotic metal sprawl. Old battleships, shattered freighters, forgotten relics of 100 wars, all fused into one lawless city. The docking bay was a sprawling, dim-lit mess, with ships of all sizes crammed into every available space. As the Revenant settled onto the landing pad, Yari peered out the viewport. She had never seen a place like this. People moved through the docks in thick clusters. Humans, Bracthants, Draelans, and other species she didn't recognize. Some wore armor, others tattered robes, and many were armed to the teeth. Vex shut down the engines and leaned back with a satisfied sigh. "Welcome to Black Outpost." Owen exhaled. "I hate it already." The cost of a favor. Navigating Black Outpost was like walking through a shifting labyrinth of danger. Yari stayed close to Owen as they weaved through the neon-lit corridors and industrial catwalks, past makeshift bars and trading stalls stacked with contraband. She felt the weight of 100 eyes watching her, sizing her up. "This place is unsettling," she whispered. Owen grunted. "Understatement." Vex led them to a shadowed alcove in one of the station's many bars, a quiet, smoke-filled establishment where deals were made and lives were bought. A lone figure waited for them. He was human, broad-shouldered, draped in a dark coat that barely concealed the heavy pistol at his hip. His face was sharp, weathered, with dark eyes that gleamed like a predator's. Owen tensed beside Yari. "Ronan," he said flatly. The man smirked. "Owen, been a long time." Vex slid into a seat across from him, kicking her boots up on the table. "We need safe passage. Off the grid." Ronan tilted his head, his gaze flicking to Yari. "Ah," he murmured. "And this must be the reason you're in trouble." Yari swallowed hard. Owen's expression darkened. "You helping us or not?" Ronan exhaled, rubbing his jaw. "Depends. What are you offering?" Owen reached into his jacket, pulling out another data chip, the second half of the Dominion encryption key. Ronan's eyes flickered with interest. "That's valuable," he admitted. "Enough to make me consider helping you." Yari's stomach tightened. "He's not agreeing yet." Owen scowled. "What else do you want?" Ronan leaned forward. His voice dropped to something quieter, something deadlier. "There's a man here. A warlord. Goes by the name Torin Vesque." Owen's jaw clenched. "I've heard of him." "Then you know he's a problem." Ronan folded his hands. "I want him dead." Vex let out a low whistle. "You don't ask for much, do you?" Ronan smirked. "You want off-world with no one tracking you? That's the price." Yari looked at Owen. She knew the answer before he spoke. "Fine," he muttered. And just like that, the job was set. The warlord's domain. Torin Vesque was one of Black Outpost's most feared leaders. His fortress, a heavily reinforced sector of the station, was a stronghold of guards, defenses, and stolen Dominion tech. Vex got them in. She had connections. Fake IDs, stolen access codes, the works. But once inside, it was up to Owen and Yari to finish the job. They moved through the darkened corridors, past sentries armed with plasma rifles. Yari's heart pounded. She wasn't a fighter, but she had something else. A gift. She had tried to suppress it for so long, afraid of what it meant, what it could make her. But now, as they approached Torin Vesque's private chambers, she let herself see. Flashes of movement. Echoes of what was about to happen. She grabbed Owen's sleeve just before he stepped around the next corner. "Wait," she whispered. Owen stopped instantly, his instincts trusting her without question. Yari took a breath. 3 guards. Left side. One moving forward. A weapon raised. She whispered, 3 guards left. Owen didn't ask how she knew. He just acted. Before the guards even had a chance to react, Owen stepped out and fired. The first shot took one down. The second dropped another. The third managed to spin toward them, but Yari had already moved. She threw herself low, grabbing a fallen rifle and swinging it up just in time to block a blade aimed at Owen's back. A split second. A heartbeat. Owen twisted, his pistol flaring. The last guard fell. Silence. Owen turned to Yari, breathing hard. How did you? Yari met his gaze. I just knew. Owen studied her for a long moment. Then, with a slow nod, he turned toward the door ahead. Come on, he muttered. Let's finish this. The kill that changed everything. Torin Vesque was waiting for them. He was larger than Yari expected, built like a soldier, his cybernetic arm gleaming under the dim lights. He didn't seem surprised to see them. I wondered when someone would come for me, he mused. Owen leveled his gun. Then you know why we're here. Torin's lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. You think I'm just going to let you kill me? He moved. Fast. Before Owen could fire, Torin lunged, knocking the gun from his hands. Owen barely rolled away in time as a vibroblade sliced through the air. Yari saw the moment before it happened. The angle, the attack, the opening. Owen, right? She shouted. Owen reacted instantly, twisting just as Torin struck. His own knife flashed, a perfect counter. Torin staggered. Owen didn't hesitate. The second blade plunged into his throat. Silence. Torin collapsed. Yari's breath came in sharp, uneven gasps. Owen wiped his blade clean. It's done, he muttered. But Yari had the strangest feeling. It wasn't over. Not yet. Torin Vesque lay still. His body twitched once, a final, dying spasm, before the cybernetics in his arm fizzled out. The metallic hum of his augments faded, leaving only the quiet hiss of recycled air in the warlord's private chamber. Owen pulled his blade free and wiped it on Torin's coat. He didn't say anything, didn't linger. He just turned to Yari. We need to go. Yari barely heard him. Her pulse roared in her ears, her breath uneven. She had known, seen, how the fight would play out before it even happened. Every move, every counter, every opening. It had been as clear as a memory she had already lived. And she hadn't just seen it. She had made it happen. Owen grabbed her wrist, pulling her out of her thoughts. His grip was firm, grounding. Yari. Now. She swallowed hard, nodded, and followed. The halls of Torin's compound were still eerily silent. Too silent. They had expected guards. More security. A fight to escape. Instead, the corridors stretched ahead of them, empty. A prickle of unease ran down Yari's spine. Something was wrong. Then, the lights flickered red. A cold, mechanical voice echoed through the hallways. Warning. Containment protocols engaged. Owen swore under his breath. That's not good. Doors ahead slammed shut. Yari spun around, just in time to see the way they'd come seal off behind them. They were trapped. Owen's jaw clenched. Shit. Then the floor beneath them shuddered. Yari stumbled. Owen caught her, steadying them both. Was that? She started. Owen turned toward the nearest window. Just a small viewport looking out over Black Outpost's chaotic docking levels. His face went rigid. Yari followed his gaze, and her breath caught. The entire station was moving. Not just the station. Torin's entire sector. It was detaching. A deep, grating rumble vibrated through the walls as docking clamps released, severing Torin's domain from the rest of Black Outpost. The metallic groan of tearing connections filled the air, and beyond the viewport, Yari saw the vast sprawl of the station pulling away. This section, Torin's fortress, was breaking off, becoming its own ship. Her stomach turned. This wasn't just a stronghold. Owen's expression darkened. No, it's a goddamn warship. The red emergency light strobed, casting long shadows across the corridor. The station's automated voice continued its lifeless warning. Manual launch sequence initiated. Destination, unknown. Yari turned to Owen. What do we do? Owen ran a hand through his hair, eyes scanning the sealed bulkheads, the reinforced doors. We need to get to the command center. Stop this thing before it jumps. Yari hesitated. And if we can't? Owen didn't answer. He didn't need to. If this ship jumped to an unknown location, if they lost contact with Vex and Black Outpost, they might never get back. They ran. Yari tried not to think about the fact that they had no plan, no idea where the bridge even was. The halls were winding, endless, the architecture different from the rest of the station. Sleeker, colder, more advanced. This wasn't just a stitched-together pirate den. This was something designed. Then, as they rounded a corner, movement. Yari barely had time to react before a figure stepped out of the shadows. Owen raised his gun on instinct. "Lower your weapon," the stranger said. Their voice was smooth, calm, commanding. Yari froze. The man before them was Solari. But not just any Solari. His robes were layered in deep violet and black, adorned with the silver sigil of an order Yari knew only from whispered stories. His skin shimmered faintly, the same lavender hue as hers, but his eyes burned with silver fire, the mark of a true seer. Owen didn't lower his weapon. "Who the hell are you?" The Solari tilted his head slightly, as if studying them. Then he spoke. "I am Vale Salrin." Yari's throat tightened. She knew that name. Owen's grip on his gun didn't waver. "You're one of them." Vale inclined his head. "Yes." Yari swallowed hard. "Why are you here?" Vale didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked toward Torin's fallen chamber, the place where they had left the warlord's corpse cooling on the floor. His gaze was unreadable. Then, finally, he spoke. "You believe you killed him?" Owen frowned. "Pretty sure I did." Vale's lips curled slightly. "You are mistaken." A cold shudder ran through Yari's bones. Before she could ask what he meant, Vale lifted a hand. And behind him, the door to Torin Vesque's chamber hissed open. Yari's breath caught in her throat. Torin Vesque, the man they had killed, stepped through the threshold. But something was different. His skin was paler. His veins darkened. His cybernetic arm hummed with new energy. His eyes, once normal, now burned with the same silver fire as Vale's. Owen inhaled sharply. "Oh, hell." Yari's pulse thundered. What did you do to him?" Vale smiled. "We did nothing," he said. "We simply gave him what was always within him." Torin's lips parted. His voice came, deeper, layered. "You are too late to stop what has already begun." The ship rumbled beneath them. The entire structure lurched forward, the unmistakable hum of a jump drive activating. Vale stepped aside, as if allowing them to witness what was happening. Through the viewport, the stars shifted. A brilliant, blinding pulse of light filled the sky, and in the next instant, the ship was somewhere else. Somewhere dark. Somewhere waiting. The moment the ship re-entered real space, Yari felt it. A pressure. A wrongness. Like the universe itself was holding its breath. Outside the viewport, the stars were distant, scattered, wrong. The system they had jumped to wasn't on any chart Yari recognized. There was no central sun, only the faint, dying glow of a red dwarf, casting long, eerie shadows across a shattered asteroid belt. And in the distance, hanging in the void like a monolith of forgotten purpose, a station. Massive, ancient. The structure was unlike anything Yari had ever seen. It was not Solari, not Dominion, not built by any known species. Jagged spires of dark metal jutted from its surface, interwoven like veins of something still alive. The station pulsed, a rhythmic, slow vibration that she could feel in her bones. Owen muttered under his breath, "Where the hell are we?" Vale Salrin didn't answer. He simply smiled. Torin Vesque stood behind him, breathing, but not alive. His eyes burned with silver fire, his expression eerily calm, as if the thing inside him had abandoned mortality entirely. Owen didn't lower his weapon. "I don't know what kind of game you're playing," he growled, "but you're gonna tell us what the hell this place is." Vale tilted his head, his silver-lit gaze unwavering. "This place has many names." He turned to Yari. "But you already know that, don't you, child?" Yari's breath hitched. No. She had never seen this place before, never even heard of it. And yet, she felt it. A whisper, curling at the edges of her mind. A memory not her own. Something deep inside her trembled. "What is this place?" she whispered. Vale's gaze softened, as if pleased. "A temple. A tomb. A beginning." Owen exhaled sharply. "Enough riddles." His finger hovered over the trigger. "Tell me why we're here before I put a hole in you." Vale didn't flinch. Instead, he merely gestured toward the station looming beyond the viewport. "Because," he said, "this is where the Solari were born." Silence. Owen frowned. "What?" Vale's expression didn't change. You call us Silari, a species, a people. But long ago, we were something else, something more. And we have waited for a long time to reclaim what was lost. Yari's heart pounded. She didn't understand, but she did. Somewhere, deep inside her blood, she had always known. This place called to her. The ship's docking clamps engaged, locking onto the station with a mechanical groan. The moment the airlock cycled open, a rush of cold air spilled into the corridor. The scent was sharp. Ozone, dust, metal, something ancient. Vale stepped forward without hesitation. Torin Vesque followed in eerie silence, his movements too smooth, too unnatural for a man who had been dead only minutes ago. Owen grabbed Yari's arm before she could move. You don't have to follow them, he murmured. Yari swallowed. But I do. Owen's jaw tightened. He didn't argue, but she could see the unease in his eyes, the tension in his grip. For the first time since they had met, Yari realized Owen was afraid. Not of the station, not of Vale, not even of Torin. He was afraid for her. But she wasn't a child anymore. Yari gently pulled free. I have to know. Owen exhaled, rubbing a hand down his face. Damn it. Then, after a long pause, I'm right behind you. Yari nodded, and together, they stepped into the dark. The station's interior was immense. Towering halls of dark metal stretched endlessly, their walls lined with engraved symbols that pulsed with faint, ghostly light. The architecture felt organic, like it had grown rather than been built, and it was alive. Yari could feel it, not as a sound, not as a presence, but as a heartbeat, a slow, rhythmic pulse buried beneath the metal walls. Thump, 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 thump. Her breath quickened. She turned to Vale. What is this place? Vale's gaze burned with something reverent. It is the first world. Owen let out a dry laugh. Right. Sure. And I'm the Emperor of the Dominion. Vale ignored him. Instead, he raised a hand, and the walls responded. The engraved symbols shifted, rearranging themselves like living circuits. Yari's pulse spiked. What are you doing? She whispered. Vale glanced at her, opening the door. The station shuddered. A deep, resonant chime echoed through the halls, vibrating through Yari's bones. Then, the walls peeled apart, and beyond them, a chamber, massive, endless, and at its center, a colossal structure, a heart. It beat in the darkness, its surface smooth and glass-like, pulsing with deep, golden light. Not a machine, not organic, something between. Owen inhaled sharply. What the hell? Yari stepped forward. The moment she did, it reacted. Light crawled up its surface, moving like liquid fire. Symbols and patterns shifted, forming something new. And deep in the station's core, a voice spoke, not in words, not in sound, but in understanding. It spoke to Yari, to her blood. Welcome home. Yari gasped, because she understood it, not as a translation, but as memory. And for the first time in her life, she knew who she really was. The words, welcome home, echoed in Yari's mind, more than sound, more than meaning. They resonated in her bones, vibrating through every cell of her body, like a song she had known all her life but had only just remembered. She staggered, breath hitching, eyes locked onto the pulsing heart of the station. It was alive, not in the way a creature was, not in the way a machine functioned. It was something between, something ancient, something Silari. Owen grabbed her arm. Yari. His voice was sharp, but there was an edge to it, something almost pleading. Whatever the hell is happening, we need to go. Now. She turned to him, but for the first time, she wasn't sure if she was looking at him with the same eyes. Because she could see. Not the future, not fragments of possibility like before. She saw everything. The threads of time unwoven before her. The past stretching back in echoes, showing her what had been hidden for centuries. And the truth was so much worse than she could have imagined. Vale Salrin stood still, watching her, as if waiting for her to understand. And she did. She saw it, played out in endless, crystalline clarity. The Solari had not been born. They had been made. Once, long before the Dominion, Before the war, before even the first known civilizations, there had been another species. A species of scholars, of visionaries, of beings who sought to surpass time itself. They had built this place. Not a temple, not a graveyard, a cradle, a forge for something new. They had experimented on themselves, reaching beyond their own limits, rewriting their own DNA, splicing it with something other. And the result had been the Solari. Not a people, a weapon, a species designed for one purpose: to become seers, to peer into the fabric of time, to predict every war, every betrayal, every uprising, before they happened. They had been perfect, too perfect, and so their creators had feared them, and so their creators had tried to erase them. But the Solari had survived. They had fled, scattered among the stars, forgetting who they truly were. Until now, until she had come home. Yari's breath came fast and shallow. "No," she whispered. Vale stepped closer, his silver eyes gleaming. "You understand now, don't you?" Owen glanced between them, frustration breaking into his voice. "Understand what?" Vale exhaled. "That Yari is not just a Solari." Owen's fingers twitched toward his gun. "What are you saying?" Vale's lips curled in something almost reverent. "She is the last piece of what was lost." He turned back to Yari. "You feel it, don't you? The station responds to you. The core speaks to you. Because you are not merely one of our kind." He knelt before her, lowering his head in devotion. "You are the last of the first ones." Yari shook her head. No, that wasn't possible. She was just a refugee, a survivor, a lost girl hiding in the cargo hold of a smuggler's ship. She wasn't, but she could feel it. Deep in her chest, the pulse of the station matched her own heartbeat. The energy curling in her veins was the same energy in these walls. She was connected to this place, because this place had made her. Vale rose to his feet. His silver eyes gleamed with purpose. "With you, we can rebuild what was lost," he said. "We can reclaim what was taken from us. No more hiding, no more running. The Solari will rise again." Behind him, Torin Vesque stood silently, his glowing eyes locked onto her. A soldier, reborn as something else. Yari felt the weight of their expectation. The entire station thrummed in anticipation. This was why they had brought her here. Not to kill her, not to use her, to crown her. She had a choice: step forward and take what was hers, or turn away and leave behind what she was meant to become. Yari's breath shook. She felt Owen beside her, felt the heat of his presence, the solid certainty of him. He had never asked her to be anything more than what she was. And now, she wasn't sure who that was anymore. Vale extended a hand. "Yari, take your place." Owen exhaled slowly. "You don't have to do this, kid." Yari turned to him. "But if I don't, will they ever stop hunting me?" Owen didn't have an answer, because he knew the truth. The Solari, Vale, the others, the remnants of the old world, would never stop. Not unless she made them. Not unless she became what they wanted. Yari closed her eyes. She had spent so long running, so long hiding. Maybe it was time to stop. She opened her eyes, and she made her choice. Yari stepped forward. Owen stiffened beside her. "Yari." She turned to him, and for the first time, she looked at him not as a lost child, but as something more. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Owen's expression darkened. "No, don't do this." She felt it, the shift, the power awakening in her as soon as she accepted it. The station recognized her. The walls glowed brighter. The pulse in the floor matched her own heartbeat. Vale smiled. "Good." And then, the chamber lit up. Golden light rushed into her veins, a warmth so powerful it was almost unbearable. She felt everything. The past, the present, the threads of 100 possible futures. She saw Owen's fate. She saw hers. And she saw what she had to do. The chamber sealed. Owen shouted her name, but the door between them slammed shut. Her last glimpse of him, his face, twisted in horror. Then, darkness. Yari turned back to Vale. The choice had been made. She was no longer running. She was becoming. And the galaxy would never be the same. Somewhere, in the depths of Dominion space, a warship's sensors flickered. An operator frowned at his readings. "My lord," he whispered, turning to his commander. "We have detected something." The figure in the command chair stirred. "What is it?" The operator hesitated. "A disturbance. A pulse of energy from deep space. Unlike anything we've recorded before." The commander frowned. "What coordinates?" The operator's throat bobbed. "A forgotten system. Uncharted. Dead for millennia." The commander's voice was cold. "Then why is it waking up now?" No one had an answer. But across the stars, the Solari were no longer sleeping, and their queen had risen.